Welcome to Sagenheim and the audiobook of the Thidrekssaga, where in the last episode you've heard about extraordinary generosity, Valtari of Vaskerstein, and the death of a king. So now onwards to something new from days of old. One day, when Thidrek was sitting in his high seat, surrounded by his champions, a man came in on foot. He was tall and strong, but he was not well provided with clothes nor with weapons. He had a white head, and one could not see his face clearly. The man went before the king and greeted him courteously. The king received him well, even though he was a foreigner, because he was modest and courteous. Thidrek asked now who he was. He answered, "My name is Vildifer, and my family is in Amlungland. I have come here for the purpose of offering you my service, to ride with you, and to become your vassal, if you will accept." And Thidrek answered, "Even though you are unknown, I will accept your service if you wish to serve me well, and if these, my good men here before me, will accept you into their company." And Vidga spoke, "No one will speak against him, sir, if you wish to accept him. And it is better to take a good man into your company than to turn him away." And the king welcomed the man warmly into his company and showed him to his place. He went to wash his hands, and then he went to table. And when he stretched out his hands from his coat of wool fur, Vidga saw that he had a thick gold ring around his arm. And for this reason, he thought that he must come from a good family, even though he made little of himself. And Thidrek presented him now with good clothing and a good horse and weapons. Vildifer now appeared to be the handsomest and most courteous of men, and he associated himself first with the king, and then with the best man. Vidga and Vildifer became good companions, so that each could not do without the other. And the king preferred to be with him rather than all the others. King Thidrek now heard of a noble man named Herbrand. He had traveled more than any man he had heard of, and he had been with practically all of the noblest chieftains who lived south to the sea. He had also traveled widely in Greece and knew all of their customs. He knew almost all languages that could be spoken, and he was the greatest man of valor. And Thidrek sent this man word that he wished to meet him, and so he came to the king's court. He was welcomed warmly and became a knight of King Thidrek. He became his closest counselor, because he was a wise man and very experienced in all things. He bore King Thidrek's standard and carried it well and courteously. All of this time, there had been great enmity between King Attila in Hunaland and King Osantrix in Vilkinaland, and Attila had alternately victory and defeat. King Attila had strengthened himself and augmented his forces through friendship with powerful chieftains and vassals. He was well liked throughout his kingdom by the common people. Everyone wished to live and die as they were, but he was unable to gain more retainers from his people, because he did not want to demand more from the chieftains within his land. He dealt generously with everyone he ruled, because it seemed bad to most people to live under tyranny. Osantrix had adopted another disposition as he got older than he had had when he was young. He exercised such harsh authority over the people who were in his land that they scarcely bore the weight he lay on the neck of every man. He relied on the wideness of his land and on his multitude of warriors. The more taxes he collected, the more he demanded. He engaged in commerce with everyone inside his kingdom and outside, rich and poor, even with his retainers and the farmers and merchants. Even though he had given his knights fiefs to have for themselves, he wanted to oversee himself and to be placed over them. However much was brought to him, he demanded more. Money and provisions were always in short supply at his court, and when they were brought in, it was always as if it had been dumped into a bag, and there was always hunger and starvation. There was a levy of men every 12 months, as everyone would expect, because he had such a great enmity for Attila, and each attacked the other's kingdom. But it seemed unfitting, and to go against strength and reasonableness, that as soon as the fighting had passed, he immediately laid taxes and levies on all the people in the land, while he sat at peace. He confiscated the possessions of other men for himself and his kinsmen, because they had all learned their villainy in the same book. His people were only left in peace when he was abroad at battle. They all hoped that he would one day leave on an expedition and not return. Osantrix had 2 giants with him, Vidolf Mittumstangi and Avendrod, his brother. But he had sent 1 giant, their brother Edgar, to King Isung in Bertangaland out of friendship. And Isung had placed Edgar in a large forest near one of his borders to watch over the land. And Isung feared nothing from that part of the land where Edgar watched. We must now speak of King Attila. He would have liked to make peace with King Osantrix if he could have chosen. He sent many men to meet with him and find out from him whether he would settle with him. And when Attila became sure that he would not settle with him under any circumstances, he sent his letter and seal to King Thidrek in Bern, asking him to come to Hunaland, if he would give him support, and to bring with him all of his best warriors, because he wanted to harry in Hunaland against King Osantrix. Because of his need, he asked him not to put the matter under his pillow, because each of them had promised the other help. And King Thidrek set out to go, because he saw that his friend needed his help. He rode from Bern with 500 men, all well tested in valor, and with them warriors from all around. And when they arrived in Hunaland, King Attila became very happy about their arrival and welcomed them warmly. He was ready to ride with them into Hunaland. And they rode with all of their army into Hunaland. And when they arrived there, they plundered and killed many, but some escaped. And they burned large and beautiful castles, and many villages and large farms. They also took in much booty, many men, and much gold and silver. King Osantrix had collected a large army from all of his kingdom, and they rode now to meet the overwhelming army. And when the armies met, there was a great battle and much loss of men. Herbrand, Thidrek's standard-bearer, rode forward boldly and struck both men and horses on both sides of him, and cast each one down dead on top of the other. After him rode Thidrek himself and his warriors, and they fought with great pride, testing their swords on hard helmets, thick shields and strong byrnies. And none of the comrades failed to aid the other, and no one was able to stand against them as they advanced. They rode into the middle of the army of Vilkina men, and felled men on both sides. Vidolf Mittumstangi came at them, and struck with his iron staff at Vidga, because he was ahead of the others. And he struck his helmet, so that he immediately fell to the earth from his horse, and there was such a ringing in his temples that he lost consciousness. Heimir stood nearby, and he took his sword Mimung from where it had fallen and took it away. The Vilkina men fought valorously now. The battle was fierce and many men fell. King Thidrek egged all his men on, and said that he did not want them to boast so much, and he said that no one should hold back any longer. And they should show the Vilkina men what they could do. And let us show them our handiwork. Now they became twice as fierce as before, and no one could stand against them. King Osantrix now saw that there was only one choice left, which was that he and his men should flee. He had already lost 500 knights, but Attila had only lost 300, and he drove them to flight. Just then, Herbrand, King Osantrix's nephew, came along with his troops and saw where Vidga was laying. He recognized him immediately by his weapons and his appearance, and from reports. He took him and bound him and led him away. Herbrand now saw that there was nothing left but to get away, because King Osantrix, his kinsman, had fled along with all of his men. And they now fled like all the others. The Vilkina men left in defeat this time, and each went home to his own domain. And King Osantrix cast Vidga into a dungeon. King Attila and King Thidrek rode home now to Susa, which was the capital of Attila's kingdom, and they remained there a night. The next morning, Thidrek rode home to Bern, and he had lost 60 men besides Vidga, but he missed him more than all of the others. And Vildifer went before King Thidrek and asked him to leave him there to remain a while. And King Thidrek asked him why he wanted to stay. Vildifer said that he did not want to return to Bern before he found out whether Vidga, his comrade, was dead or alive. King Thidrek praised him for that, and he remained there with King Attila, but Thidrek rode home now to Bern. A few days later, King Attila went into a forest called Lyrawald, and he hunted animals and birds with hawks and dogs. Vildifer and many other men and knights were with him. When they had passed, Attila returned home with his men. Vildifer remained behind in the forest alone, with 2 large hunting dogs. And he found a forest bear, the largest of all the animals. And he caught the bear and flayed off its skin. He went secretly with the bear's skin and hid it where he alone knew where it was. And thus we arrived at the end of this episode. If you want to know about Attila's Hall in Soest, the mysterious bear skin, and the sword Mimung, tune into the next episode of the Thidrekssaga here at Sagenheim.